From the castle in Owings Mills, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer here with you on a Thursday in September. It's not fall. It felt very sunny out there today, about 80 degrees, as we watched as little of practice as the Ravens will allow us, or as much of practice as the Ravens will allow us. We are going to be previewing the Ravens Week 3 game against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. We'll have our predictions. We'll talk about some big matchups in this one. Also talk about how this first half of the schedule is shaping up. What once looked like perhaps a murderer's row of opponents might be a little bit softer than we once thought. But Jonas, it is not yet fall because I have not yet had my first pumpkin spice latte of the season. That's the leaf that has to be turned in order for it to become fall.
I also have not had my first pumpkin spice latte.
How many
of my lifetime?
You've never had one?
No, I'm not a coffee drinker. You know this.
Yeah, but
I'm not going to
pay.
It's
not really coffee.
I'm not going to pay $8 for a free little drink.
It's not $8. I mean, how much are you tipping?
I'm not tipping because I'm not going into Starbucks.
What if I got one for myself and then brought it to practice?
You've offered to pay for coffee for me beforehand, and I tell you to donate to a more noble cause.
All right, what if
my energy?
What if I get a coffee and just pour some into a cup for you to try?
I'll do that.
Okay, we'll do a taste test.
Sure.
How does that sound?
Yeah,
I'll do the new fall lineup for Starbucks.
We'll compare new Starbucks drinks to Ravens players. Who's the most pumpkin spice latte coated of the Ravens roster? And why is it Daniel Failele?
Who's the flat white in this group? All right, Jonas, let's do our word of the day, the bit that you hate, but the bit that I love. And that word is flocculent. You want to know what it means?
I had no clue.
I had never heard of this word before. It means resembling wool, especially in loose, fluffy organization. Now, why did I pick flocculent for today? Well, first off, it sounds like flock, Ravens flock. Second off, the Lions in general, not the Lions, the animal doesn't have wool, but they do have manes, and this is wool-like. And the third and final reason is I put soft into thesaurus.com and flocculent came up, and I said, this is a cool sounding word. And the reason I wanted soft or flocculent in this instance, or even ductile, which I thought about as our backup word of the day, is because the Ravens schedule, at least pre-bye, might be a little bit easier than we once thought. When this schedule came out in May, and even as recently as 2 weeks ago, you looked at the Ravens' first 6 opponents, and you saw 5 playoff teams from 2024. You saw at least 3 or 4 teams in there that are true contenders. Obviously started at Bills. Second week was the soft one. That one was the cupcake. That one was at home against the Browns. Then it's at home against the Lions, which we will preview in just a bit. Then it's on the road in Kansas City in week 4, at home against the Houston Texans, and at home against the Rams before they run into the bye. And Jonas, that group still is in the upper echelon of the NFL, but that group in all has gotten off to a little bit of a slower start than we might have imagined.
Yeah. Paul Thomas Anderson has been on my mind recently because of all the incredible reviews for his newest movie coming out.
I can't wait to see it.
One battle after another. And you know what? That sounds like a pretty good description for what we thought this Ravens stretch of games would be, because you had the Lions, the top seed in the NFC last year. Obviously, they took their lumps in week 1. Chiefs, everyone had them as the second or third banana in the AFC. Houston, obviously, there was some hope that defense would remain elite and they'd have some positive growth on offense. And then the Rams, just, if Matthew Stafford's bulky back was all right, then they would be a potential Super Bowl sleeper. But now, I don't know. Could the stretch of games be a little bit more boogie nights? Could the good times be rolling here?
Until the last third of that movie.
Yes. And we're not going to talk about the final scene of that movie in the context.
We won't talk about a lot of scenes in that movie. Great film.
Great film. And one I didn't see until a couple of years ago.
So in all honesty, to be transparent here, I do love that movie. I like a few other Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I haven't seen his classics. I haven't seen Magnolia, and I also haven't seen Phantom Thread, which I really would like to see.
That's good. I saw that with my aunt. Shout out to Aunt Susie.
Really?
Big time cinephile. I did not appreciate how, I guess it's a lot of it is about just like sex and romance. I got the romance part of it, but I didn't really get the implicit parts about how carnal of a relationship that they had.
This is a trap, and I'm not stepping into it.
I'm just saying that's what the subtext is.
I'm definitely going to watch the new PTA movie because I also do love Leonardo DiCaprio. He's my guy.
Yeah.
In terms of this Ravens schedule, Bills obviously are 2-0. One of those wins came against the Ravens. They still look like a legit Super Bowl contender. Browns obviously are on the opposite end of the spectrum, but then Lions getting crushed by the Packers in week 1 and then bouncing back in week 2. Kansas City 0-2 for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era. Houston is 0-2. They don't look like a fully formed offense right now. They scored just a combined 28 points in their first 2 games of the season. And the Rams, I would say, have shown nothing to dissuade us from picking them to be a playoff team as well.
But even then, they barely eked out a win over the Texans in week 1 against an offensive line that was playing its first snaps together, I guess, aside from the preseason. And then they took a dump truck to the Titans, and the Titans are a team that we thought would be one of the worst teams in the NFL. So a 33-19 is nice, but it's just kind of like the Ravens taking care of business against the Browns. It's not really anything to write home about.
Yeah, no, it's 2 weeks. So,
and also I'm sure we'll talk about this when we get to it, the game, but teams going from the West Coast to the East Coast, I guess you could say that there's a little bit of even this one, because that is a 1:00 game in Baltimore for a team that, depending on when they do their travel, could be really at a sleep disadvantage. That's something that I think the Seahawks have regretted in the past, just deciding when to come to Baltimore and try to get your circadian rhythm in line with what it should be, because sometimes teams making that West Coast to East Coast swing just have a terrible, terrible time of getting up for the games. And that's certainly a realistic possibility, even with as forward thinking in an organization as the Rams are.
I think that the organization, though, is still pretty solid. And so long as Matthew Stafford is healthy there, high floor. So yeah. I think the Rams are still a good team. I think my opinion on the Chiefs has changed a little bit. Whether they have Xavier Worthy, Rice is going to make a lot of the difference as to him next week, I think, as well. They won't have Rashee Rice, right? I mean, he's still going to be suspended for that game. And I think Xavier Worthy probably would be doubtful for that game if we were looking at it this far ahead of time. Houston just does not look like a good team. There were a lot of questionable moves they had in the offseason, and they have not been able to protect CJ Stroud. They haven't been able to do much on offense. It's all caveated. I don't know if that's a verb, but it's all just 2 weeks in. This is only 2 games for all of these teams. So it is a bit premature for us to be looking at this right now and say, well, none of these teams are good anymore because they haven't racked up the kind of wins we thought that they would. It's still super early in the season.
Right.
But it is exciting if you're a Ravens fan when you look beyond the you could back again. Against Cincinnati. Those teams, some of those teams, I mean, Miami looks like an absolute dumpster fire right now. Minnesota with JJ McCarthy, I know he's hurt right now, but he does not look like he's going to be a top 10 quarterback right out of the gate.
They've been playing without Darisaw at left tackle. They'll have Jordan Addison back. I think, depending on the quarterback, obviously that's the big variable in all this. But certainly probably among the more disappointing teams in the NFL the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then at Cleveland again, at the Jets, who are just not a good team.
Versus the Jets, right?
Oh, at home against the Jets, yes. And then you're looking at the Cincinnati game there, potentially without Joe Burrow. So it's an exciting here when you're looking ahead. It's way down the line, but perhaps this first place schedule for the Ravens isn't quite as hard as we once thought.
Yeah, and that's why I just get bothered a little bit by people making proclamations on the outlooks for seasons based on these projections of season or of schedule difficulty. Like, so much of this is just random and variable, and we know nothing about what these teams actually will be in June and July when smart people try to put together these ratings. Like, obviously certain teams have a certain limit, a certain ceiling of their potential because of what their quarterback is, but even then, teams with good quarterbacks watch those good quarterbacks get hurt.
Yeah.
So we are talking about Cincinnati probably being without Joe Burrow for not just the Week 13 game, but the the game a couple weeks later, whether it's week 15, week 16, when they go to Cincinnati to play Joe Burrow. I think that falls within that 3-month time frame of the turf toe injury sidelining Joe Burrow. So, again, this could all change very, very quickly. It wouldn't surprise me if, in between week 3 and week 8, something in that Chicago offense clicks and they just come to Baltimore looking like a much, much different than one we've seen so far. But it is a relatively accommodating schedule. And I guess before we move on to this next game on the schedule, what do you think is the hardest game before they get to that week 7 bye?
Before they get to
everything, the turnaround time, the location, what we expect to be, who we expect to be on that team when the kickoff arrives, etc.
I would honestly say it's going to be. It's a close call for me. I'd say between the game at home on Monday night against the Lions, the one that we're about to preview, and on the road against Kansas City.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards Chiefs.
Because I worry a little bit about us getting too down on the Chiefs. I worry a little bit about us underrating the Chiefs, and especially at Arrowhead. We can't underrate Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. This Monday night game, for all the reasons that we're going to get into, would scare me if I were a Ravens fan, however, because of the way that the Lions looked in week 2.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the Chiefs being the more fearful. Just the Ravens' record on Monday Night Football is incredible. Lamar Jackson's record on Monday Night Football is incredible. Obviously, it's not a primetime game there in week 4 in Kansas City, but I believe it's the late afternoon kickoff, so you do have that island game feel to it. And again, just the Ravens have not been able to crack Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. They're 0-3 against Mahomes in the Lamar era. Not a lot of blowouts in that range. Average margin of defeat is 5 points. I think it's a 3-pointer, 5-pointer, 7-pointer. But the one thing Kansas City has shown well so far and is that run defense. And if they can get the Ravens into 3rd and longs, and Steve Spagnuolo can, maybe find some of the magic that we know he has been able to find, then it could be a situation where it's just a really ugly, grinded out game between a Chiefs offense that should be a little bit more functional next week. We think if Xavier Worthy is healthy, maybe Jalen Royals gets healthy in time for that game. It's tough to win in Arrowhead.
Yeah,
every team in the NFL knows that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to preview this game between the Ravens and Lions before the Ravens play the Chiefs on the other side of this quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas, time to hand out our Who's Got It Better Than award, and it goes to tight end Isaiah Likely, who is ramping back up. He told WJZ on Wednesday night that his return is very soon, and we saw on the practice report that he was listed as a limited participant as he recovers from his foot surgery. He was moving pretty well out there. This is really the first time that we've seen him, work with the other tight ends in a limited capacity, although he was listed, I believe, last week as well as a limited participant before the Browns game. Did not play, but we are inching closer to the return of Isaiah Likely, which could mean big things for the Ravens offense.
Yeah, this is a Lions team, a Lions defense that likes to match tight ends with linebackers, and we've seen that can be an advantage for the Ravens because of the receiving ability of Mark Andrews, of Isaiah Likely, even of Charlie Kolar. Obviously, not a whole lot of love so far for the Ravens tight ends. I think just 10% or so of Lamar's targets have gone to tight ends in this early season. But if Isaiah can, get up to full go, can get up to full speed, can find that chemistry that he had with Lamar, that he's had with Lamar over the past couple of years, that is a good thing for how this Ravens offense could potentially attack this Lions defense. But you don't want to rush him back. I think it'd be unrealistic to expect him to be the Isaiah Likely of old in his first game back. It's been a while since he's had full speed reps. And again, it's been 6+ weeks, 7+ weeks since that foot injury. So we'll see. I think just everyone should, exercise some patience with him finding his groove in this offense after the long layoff that he's had.
This is a Ravens offense that is still operating without fullback Patrick Ricard, who has been dealing with a calf injury, somebody who went down near the end of training camp. And I don't think we expected, and certainly the Ravens didn't expect him to be out for this long. John Harbaugh said the other day that it has been slower than they hoped for sure, and probably in a week-to-week mode with Patrick Ricard. That is not good news for a Ravens run game that struggled in week 2 against the Cleveland Browns, and will try to right the ship against the Lions. On the defensive side, we did not see Kyle Van Noy out there, who suffered a hamstring strain. John Harbaugh basically said it's going to be week to week when it comes to KVN. We also didn't see Nate Wiggins out there, who was listed with a groin injury and did not practice. A little bit of a surprise to see Nate Wiggins not out there today.
Yeah, especially because he played pretty much to the end of that game on Sunday. There was some concern raised by reporters that he was hurt on the Cheeto Awuzie celebration of his interception in that third quarter, but he played through it. John Harbaugh said he was fine on Monday. He said today after practice that he's hopeful that Nate will be able to go on Thursday. Obviously, the Ravens need as much defensive firepower as possible, considering just how talented this Lions offense is. But on the groin injury standpoint, you get some good news there with Marlon Humphrey being back out there on the field today, full go, according to the Ravens injury report. Obviously, he was basically kind of took himself out of commission on Sunday. He left the field pretty early in that fourth quarter. We saw him running around on the sideline, which is, I think, always a pretty good indication that, it wasn't as bad as it perhaps could have been. But certainly, you want as much depth as possible there, with us not knowing if Jair Alexander is going to be a healthy scratch or not. And just the talent that this offense has with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, all guys who Marlon Humphrey could conceivably cover, all guys who Nate Wiggins could conceivably cover. But I think obviously you want as many guys healthy as possible. And, you want to see Nnamdi Madubuike out there as well. I think when we saw him out there, when we saw him missing at practice today, we figured it was just the Ravens resting him up because that ankle injury that he was dealing with last week, obviously it wasn't really that much of an issue because he had another sack. But to see him land on this injury report with a neck injury is a little bit of a worrisome red flag.
Yeah, not great that Nnamdi Madubuike for the second week in a row is missing from practice with a different injury. Let's go back to Jair Alexander, because he was listed on the injury report midweek last week and then was not given an injury designation for Sunday's game against the Browns, but was a healthy scratch. Not listed on the injury report again. He was out there practicing, but as John Harbaugh said, he's not quite in football shape. So after missing a month, they want to give him time to come back. I do wonder if he's going to be another healthy scratch against the Lions this week, assuming Marlon Humphrey is good to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know that Kyle Van Noy probably won't be going, so that opens up one spot, but
Sure.
then it's also closed pretty quickly if you expect David Ojabo to be activated, which I think we all do based on, just the kind of pecking order there. So it's going to be a situation where you got to make space for him somewhere if you do indeed want Jair Alexander back out there after the 1 week off. Haven't really done all the inactive math yet, but it's going to be a tough call every week based on just how much talent there is and how few obvious answers there are for inactives. We don't expect Kyle Van Noy to play. We don't expect Patrick Ricard, unfortunately, to play. Carson Vincent, I think you can pretty much write in pen every week that he's not going to play. But even now, if Isaiah Likely's coming up, then that's another spot that you're taking away from someone else. So the roster crunch just gets even more crunchier when a guy like Isaiah, if indeed he is going to be full participation on Friday, full participation on Saturday, I think you can probably safely say that he's going to get a good chance to play and make his NFL debut on Monday. But who does that come at the expense of?
We could also see the season debut of Keaton Mitchell, because Rasheen Ali is, after he suffered a concussion on the first play of the Browns game, is listed on the injury report as limited. So Keaton Mitchell could be taking Rasheen Ali's spot. And then on the Lions injury side, Linebacker Jack Campbell did not participate today with an ankle injury. Marcus Davenport, one of their edge rushers, chest injury, did not participate. And then Taylor Decker, tackle, shoulder injury, also not at practice. And safety Kirby Joseph with a knee injury was limited.
Yeah, three notable guys. Taylor Decker, I think he was dealing with a shoulder injury for all of week 2. Kind of, the Lions made the decision that he was still able to play, and he did a pretty good job, all things considered, despite that injury. But Marcus Davenport, not a great number 2 edge rusher. So for the Lions to potentially be losing him for this game, sounds like Dan Campbell said they're going to make a decision on his availability as late as Monday. But you don't want to be going up against any tackle with just how exposed your chest is and be dealing with a chest injury. The ankle injury for Jack Campbell is interesting because I think he's probably their most talented off-ball linebacker. He's obviously a former first-round pick. I think there's a lot of optimism about his growth in this Lions defense. You want a guy like that to be able to potentially be a spy on Lamar, or a guy who could track down Derrick Henry, track down Justice Hill, maybe Keaton Mitchell. And so if he's not on a course, if he's not projecting to be able to play on Monday night, then that is a very, very worrisome development for that Lions defense, which we think is already kind of pretty iffy in their back 7.
Yeah. All right. Let's preview this game on Monday night on ESPN between the Ravens at 1-1 and the Lions at 1-1. Ravens are favored by 4.5 points. This is a Lions team that suffered a 14-point loss in week 1 in the debut of the Micah Parsons Packers, team that I picked to go to the Super Bowl, and I still feel pretty good about that prediction. And then in week 2, took out all their frustration against Ben Johnson's Chicago Bears with a 31-point win at home. So you got the highs of last week in week 2, but you also have the lows of week 1 with this Lions team. Sort of not too dissimilar from the Baltimore Ravens 1-1 start as well. But this is a Ravens team that, as we know, Jonas, with John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, dominates in prime times, dominates NFC teams, and dominates on Monday night games, and does very well. I don't know the record, but does very well in the all-black jersey combination. Do you know their record with that, Jonas?
I don't.
That's
83-0.
Dereliction of duty there.
Yeah, they're just close to unbeatable. They've been close to unbeatable. On Monday night, they are dominant against Detroit, 5-0 under John Harbaugh, 6-1 all time. 5 consecutive Monday Night Football wins for the Ravens, tied with the Steelers for the NFL's longest active streak. 22-3 in home primetime games under John Harbaugh, best record in the NFL. Lamar is 7-2 in Monday Night Football starts. They've thrown 22 touchdowns, or he's thrown 22 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in those 9 games. So they are as good as it gets when it comes to these games, and that's why it makes it pretty tough for anyone to expect a complete dominant Lions win. Ravens don't get blown out.
Yeah, we
talked about this all the time.
We were just talking about this we were trying to think of the last time that the Ravens actually got blown out by a team. You came up with a game in 2020 at home against the Chiefs. That's really the last time I can think that the Ravens got blown out. They didn't get blown out by anybody in 2024, not in 2023, not really in 2022. The Ravens don't get blown out under John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. So I expect a close game pretty much no matter what. We will have, by the way, we have updates. You were probably literally updating the injury report online on thebanner.com, where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Banner.
And of course, subscribe to the Banner Ravens podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, write us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show. Or give us a like if you're watching along on YouTube, X, or Facebook. All right, we are going to look at the Ravens offense against the Lions defense and vice versa, and we'll give our score predictions for Monday night on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas, the game plan on offense last week, a lot of it at least, was stay out of the way of Myles Garrett. Chip block, try to put as many bodies on him as you possibly can. He is a one-man wrecking crew. Ravens go from one dominant sack man last week to another in Aiden Hutchinson, albeit Aiden Hutchinson has not been doing this for as long as Myles Garrett. He doesn't have the track record that Myles Garrett does, but he has immense talent. He is coming off a pretty serious leg injury, broken bones, broken tibia and fibula in week 6 last year. So week 5, I believe, last year. So we just basically played about a month plus last year before he went down with that injury. He does have a sack in his first 2 games. He had 7.5 sacks in those 5 games last year. Are you looking particularly at Aiden Hutchinson as the man to stop on that Lions defense?
Yeah, just because there's not really anyone else to worry about. I mean, like, if Marcus Davenport is your other starting defensive end, then you're in trouble, and we don't even know if he's going to be able to play on Monday. They've got some good production from Muhammad so far, but he was a practice squatter each of the past 2 years, so it really is kind of hit or miss with this Lions front, and it's I think it's going to say a lot about the Ravens and how they actually respond from what was, I think, a pretty shoddy showing against that Cleveland defensive line, because we thought it was, obviously Mason Graham is talented. I guess Isaiah McGuire might be having a breakout season for that Browns defense, but you looked at that depth chart and you didn't really have to. It felt like you didn't have to worry too much about anyone but like put the bullseye on big Myles Garrett, and yet the Ravens were overrun in their run blocking. They didn't give Lamar a whole lot of time on dropbacks until the fourth quarter and for stretches of that first half. So it's a little bit. I feel like it would be premature of us to say that the Ravens should have the advantage up front, just because there's not a lot, I think, to be confident in this offensive line coming off of what I thought was a really, really disappointing week 2 game. I mean, I know, there's a lot of hate right now for Daniel Faalele. John Harbaugh said he's had some plays that don't look good on tape, but he still feels like he's a good player. And, you tweet that out and you get all kinds of negative reaction from Ravens fans. But I think the bigger problem right now is Andrew Voorhees, who has like a much higher blown block rate, is grading out much lower on PFF. And then inside, Tyler Linderbaum doesn't look like a Pro Bowler. So you put all that together, Myles Garrett overwhelmed, Ronnie Stanley, Roger Rosengarten is still finding his way as a run blocker. And you just have a lot of cracks starting to show in this offensive line that we thought, based on the consistency that they had, how healthy they were for much of training, they'd be much further ahead in their process of coming together than it seemed like they were at home against Cleveland last week.
I have a question for you, Jonas, and this is probably a question that you have gotten from Ravens fans. What would it take to replace Daniel Faalele
or Andrew Voorhees
at right guard or Andrew Voorhees at left guard?
I that's something I've been wondering, because the Ravens on the defensive side were, led by Marlon Humphrey's comments, were pretty quick to pull the trigger on some changes. They made Jair Alexander a healthy scratch. They replaced Trenton Simpson with Teddy Buchanan, even though I think that was, kind of
already in the works.
Yeah, and it was also just a pretty close race from the get-go. And you have to wonder, why wouldn't you hold the guys on the offensive line to the same level of scrutiny, of performance-based, play, basically? Obviously, it's a little bit different because a guy like Alexander, even a guy like Teddy Buchanan, operating a little bit more in an island. You take a guy out of the offensive line, everyone has to react. Everyone has to adjust to how that guy likes to play. There is a level of familiarity that you develop with these guys after playing with them. You hope that you understand where they will be on certain plays. You understand their strengths, their weaknesses. But, the Ravens have Ben Cleveland, who hasn't been great when he's gotten in there, but I think he could be a little bit better than the second worst graded guard on PFF, which is what Andrew Voorhees is right now. Maybe you can throw Corey Bullock in there. He's trained as a center. And I'm not saying he's going to replace Tyler Linderbaum, because that would be dumb, but he has certain athletic traits that maybe would make him better suited to handle some of these guys who've given Voorhees and Faalele problems inside. And obviously, we're just a couple weeks away from Emory Jones being likely activated after the long stint on the PUP list and NFI and everything like that. I think he's probably further away from contributing because of the fact that he hasn't basically had any serious football work since the Senior Bowl workouts. But
The Senior Bowl workouts.
it's been a long time, and if this offensive line is the reason that the Ravens lose this game, like you could say that they were the reason that they couldn't finish the Bills in Week 1, then the pressure is going to get ratcheted up.
That's probably the reason that Derrick Henry never got going in Week 2 against the Browns as well, and maybe why the Browns hung around for as long as they did in that game. This is the soft, mushy part of the roster that we talked about weeks ago. When we were doing our season previews, we said the depth on the offensive line, part of this was out of Eric DeCosta and the Ravens' control, is not as good as it was last year. I mean, last year they were overturning 3 guys on the offensive line, but you felt good at least about having Patrick McCary as your do-it-all guy who can fill into every spot. They don't have a Patrick McCary this year. I mean, Emory Jones being as far removed from football as you just, Jonas, they can't count on a 3rd-round pick rookie to step up right away, even when he does come back and we haven't seen him.
Yeah, and he's never played guard in his life.
Yeah.
Well, like he's played guard at the Senior Bowl, but he hasn't played it anywhere close to this level.
Joseph Noteboom is really a swing tackle, and he didn't look phenomenal in the preseason training camp.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Corey Bullock is really a backup center. That's not going to be a change that the Ravens are going to make. And then Carson Vincent is a 5th rounder who was inactive for the first 2 weeks and is a developmental guy. So there aren't part of the reason that the Ravens haven't made changes at either of the guard spots is because who are they going to put in there? Ben Cleveland is the only guy that you could legitimately say would be perhaps an upgrade at one of those 2 spots.
Right.
But with all the struggles we saw Daniel Falele have last year, and they still didn't put in Ben Cleveland, that tells you that they're probably not going to do it until things get absolutely dire or Falele, unfortunately, would suffer an injury.
Yeah, and it might not even matter this week because, I looked at Detroit's pressures through the first 2 weeks, and they're a good blitzing team, but when they just send 4, it is just a lot of relying on those edges to win by compressing the pocket. Aiden Hutchinson has a really nice inside spin move, but they are not trying to turn the corner, and then they're not trying to dip and rip like Myles Garrett. They're not trying to, do anything too fancy that compromises those potential scrambling lanes. They don't want to give these mobile quarterbacks any easy escape pass. And you think back to what that meant for the Ravens in 2023 when they just took the Lions to the cleaners in that blowout home win. Lamar went 21 for 27, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns, average time to throw of nearly 3 seconds, which is like about average for him. But wasn't sacked once, took just 1 QB hit all game. And dear listeners, if you are listening at home, pause this and count out 9 Mississippis, because that was the time to throw of Lamar finding Nelson Aguilar in the red zone on the back of the end zone when he just was scrambling, ducking, weaving, doing everything he could to kind of evade a very, very soft Lions pass rush.
That was an insane play, I remember.
3rd longest time to throw in the next gen stats era, which goes back to 2016 at the time that it happened. So, this Lions pass rush works because it has a great pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson, but they're missing a Lean McNeil, who's a very athletic interior pass rusher. Like we said, they might not have Marcus Davenport. So it is pretty slim pickings up front. And you look at, Lions fans, they are understandably worried about this pass rush. And if they are able to give this Ravens offensive line a lot of trouble, then to me, that is a big, big warning sign that something needs to change.
Yeah. All right. On the other side of the ball, Jared Goff was absolutely cooking last week in their 52-21 win over the Chicago Bears. He went 23 for 28 for 334 yards. What was working for Jared Goff and this group of skill position players that is, quite frankly, excellent?
Yeah, it's just a really well-designed offense. Obviously, it's a new guy calling the shots there.
Yeah, even without Ben Johnson.
Yep. But they just had the Bears in conflict every time they went pre-snap motion, every time they went play action. Jared Goff, 12 for 14 for almost 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 sacks, 2 pressures when he was using play action. Pre-snap motion, that was the reason for the big Jameson Williams 50-yard touchdown. He just kind of goes from being the one receiver, receiver 1 to receiver 2, and the Bears jump on a shorter route. and he goes in behind him on a post route and is just 5 yards clear of any DB when that ball arrives. Pre-snap motion, 15 for 19 for 250 yards, 3 touchdowns. And Jared Goff, he's not as immobile as Joe Flacco, but he can do a little something to get himself out of trouble. He's not afraid to stand in there and take a hit if it means that he's going to deliver a catchable pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams or Sam Laporta. So, he's a different kind of test from a Josh Allen, but I just think when he feels good about what's coming available, he can be a very, very good quarterback.
What do you think about this Lions offensive line as well? The Ravens, assuming they will be without Kyle Van Noy, could be asking David Ojabo perhaps to play a fair amount of snaps for them and try to get some pressure on Jared Goff. But this offensive line turned over a couple players, turned over a couple starters, does not appear to be quite as established as last year's group.
Yeah, I think they're a better pass blocking group than run blocking group, and the stats back that up. I think they're 4th on ESPN in pass block win rate, 22nd in run block win rate. You look at the play action dropbacks for Jared Goff in that game against the Browns. He had all day to throw, just very clean pockets. And the Ravens players, coaches today were talking about how the Lions are a team that wants to use the run to set up the pass. So you think back to what the Ravens were able to do in 2023. Lions just got nothing working downhill, and it was always
game was over at halftime.
Yeah, and Jared Goff was kind of baffled by the Ravens. That was Mike McDonald just in his utmost bag that day. And one thing that you can expect from this Lions team, like a Ravens team, on offense is just a lot of these condensed splits, and that helps the offense with getting some of these releases and stuff, but it also helps the defense if you are creative, because you can send cornerback blitzes, and those are a lot tougher to account for when you have all these guys kind of bunched together. So I think the question that I have for the Ravens right now is just like, are they ready for the step up in skill talent that the Lions are bringing to Detroit? Because I don't know, are Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver, Sam Laporta at tight end, and Jahmyr Gibbs at running back the best players at those respective positions that the Ravens have faced this season?
So far, I think you could definitely say so. I am curious to see how this pass rush group does without Kyle Van Noy. If Mike Green can step up and produce. The Ravens did not sign Jadeveon Clowney, who many had connected them to for the past, 4 months. So ever since he got cut by the Panthers, he signed with the Dallas Cowboys. So throw him out as a Kyle Van Noy replacement. So is David Ojabo, is Mike Green going to be good enough as a replacement here? And what I was wondering, Jonas, is what is Yannick Ngakoue up to? Remember the Ravens brought him in a couple weeks into the season, and he ended up playing several games for them. I don't think he's on the team right now, so you never know. If things are really bad in this game, if they're not able to get any pressure, I don't know. Eric DeCosta might pick up the phone and start calling some guys in the street.
For some reason, I still have Jason Pierre-Paul tweets pushed to my phone, and he was actively campaigning on Twitter for someone to pick him up.
Something is wrong with you, Jonas.
Something is wrong with my push notifications.
Let's do our predictions here. Jonas, you were going with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a weird one in terms of game flow. I think it could be a situation where the Ravens get out ahead and the Lions just slowly, methodically work their way back. I could see it happening the other way around. I'm picking a slim Ravens win in this one. Ravens 28, Lions 27. I think that this game has the highest over-under for any game on the NFL slate this week. I think it's like 52.5 thereabouts. I just think that if the Ravens hold up against this Lions pass rush, which I think they should, then they should feel pretty good about their opportunities downfield. Like Brian Branch is obviously a stud, but we've seen just how much Zay Flowers is cooking. We know that Rashad Bateman can win, just hasn't had a whole lot of opportunities downfield. And you look at the weak spots on this Lions team. It's Terry and Arnold. He's the second cornerback taken in the first round last year, just a couple spots after Quinyon Mitchell got picked by the Eagles, but he had a rough rookie year. Even worse start to year 2. He's given up the most yards in coverage of any defensive back in the NFL, 175 yards in 2 games, according to. So that is and I just think the Ravens should be good enough defensively and should get enough juice from this home crowd that'll carry him to the finish line.
Was Terry Arnold? Yeah, he was taken 6 picks before The Ravens took Nate Wiggins,
Yep.
by the way. Interesting 3 quarterback grouping there with Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, and Nate Wiggins, and seeing who is good and who is not in that group. I am also picking with the Ravens. I really try to not pick the Ravens because I've picked them for the first 3 games of the season. I think you have too, Jonas. I think most of us have on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months. But I think you just look at the Ravens in primetime. You look at the Ravens on Monday nights. You look at the Ravens in the Lamar Jackson era against NFC teams, and I just have a hard time picking against them. I do have it as a high-scoring game, 33-30, but I am going with the Ravens in this one, maybe at Kansas City. If they bounce back with a win in week 3, maybe that'll be the time where I finally pick against the Ravens, because I worry I'm playing too much into the Homer. I'm not able to beat the Homer allegations.
Yeah, they did feed us with Chick-fil-A today, so it's who can blame us for picking the Ravens?
It was delicious, Jonas. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano, and at All Banner Sports. We will have a podcast for you in the early hours of Tuesday morning to recap the Ravens game against the Lions. Exciting stuff, Jonas. Any final thoughts?
Go see one battle after another.
Yeah, should we
Support
go
cinema.
together?
Huh?
Should we go together?
You're like third in line.
That is brutal. Wow. You podcast with him for 3 years and he passes you up for who else is on this list?
We don't have to talk about it.
All right. This is hurtful. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time.